super excited to do this. I've been wanting to do this for a long time, and I'm actually super happy to do this. I do this for a living. I teach at Florida Southwestern State College, not FGCU. There was a confusion there. That formerly known as Edison State College. Now we're FSW. And, my buddy Ernesto also works there. He teaches microbiology, and I teach anatomy. Yes, we actually met at a meeting here.
Yes, Ernesto has been publishing for a long time.
And then what happened was that we started talking, and I asked him, what do you do for a living? Oh, I teach at FSW. So do I. And we started talking, what do you teach? Microbiology? Me too. That was last summer last year. So from there, and then I actually ended up here. I met you guys because I had a student in one of my anatomy classes when I started working there that we started talking, and I'm like, I'm an atheist, also am I. And oh yeah, there's a group in Fort Myers. A group in Fort Myers? Yes, there is. And he brought me to one of the lunches at the Chinese place. Yeah, I've been hooked ever since. So, since I teach anatomy, I'm going to be giving you a little lecture about anatomy, but with a little twist on the evolution business.
Is there an exam?
Of course there's an exam. And there's class participation too. So, Sharon, you went to one of these exhibitions. I went to one in Miami back in the 2006 or so. It was beautiful. And I usually use these pictures for my presentations. So I titled my presentation, Evolutionary Anatomy, What a Mess. Because the thing is that because of the business of evolution, we ended up with a very, very messed up body that is very susceptible to a bunch of illnesses and diseases that they shouldn't be, but that's what we got, right? Now, evolution, as we know, is very much change over time that happens gradually, and it happens slowly, and there's no escape from it. You expose an organism to a harsh environment or to whatever environment, and the organism has two options. It's either going to adapt and change or die. So, originally, the idea, as we know, was brought about by Charles Darwin in his book, The Origin of the Species. And he talked back then about only natural selection, but then as the science of evolution got more and more vogue in the scientific community, other scientists started talking about other ways by which these mutations happen, the evolution happens. So they talked about mutations, recombination, what we call the cross-linking, meaning how we accomplish our genetic variations within our species, and the random probability. And there's endless diseases out there that are really, really good examples of evolution. My favorite example to give about evolution is cancer. You expose this lady and I, we've been buddies for 20 years, we both got the same job, and we work at a bar, and one of those bars that people smoke. 20 years later, probability, she may have lung cancer, I may have it, we may not have it. We were both exposed to the same environment, but you might have the cancer, I might get the cancer, we might get it both, you see? So it's all randomly, there's no way to tell. Of course, nowadays you can do genetic testing and all that stuff, but now, the main business about the evolution of human beings was that, first of all, the evolution business, you know, there was something, I'm taking a history class just for fun, and they're talking about social Darwinism, the survival of the fittest. The thing is that Darwin never really used that phrase. That was made up by these people at the turn of the century trying to justify the fact that people were getting richer and the poor people were getting poorer. Exactly. So it doesn't work that way. What Darwin was saying was that it's not the strongest that's going to survive. It's the one that is able to adapt the best to the environment. And the best example of that is dinosaurs and chickens. The dinosaurs didn't make it, but the chickens came from the dinosaurs, and the chickens are there. Now, who's stronger, the T-Rex or the chicken? You see? But who needs less resources to make it around? The good old chickens. So they make it. Now, when we talk about anatomy and we compare ourselves to the other species, the first thing that comes to mind is what tells us apart from the other species. And well, the number one, the size of the brain. And as you can see, this is a very cool graphic that is going to show you how you have here the apes on this side of the screen, and then on this side you're going to have the Homo sapiens, the human being. And here you're going to have the common ancestry, the common link between the two. So the idea on the tree described by Darwin was not the fact that we come from the monkey. Like a lot of people got offended when I say this in class. Oh, I come from no monkey. No, we come from a single cell organism 300,000 million years ago. But there is common ancestry, and this is the common ancestry right here. These guys became apes, these guys became Homo sapiens. And what is the difference? The size of the cranial vault. That's the main thing, because we have a humongous brain that is useless because we're still killing each other for stupid things. And we have a big frontal lobe. You guys ever watch that movie, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest? You see what they did to him, the lobectomy? So they can kind of to behave after they did that. Another cool thing about this graphic is time versus size of the brain capacity in cubic centimeters. So by here, the Homo sapiens about the adult skull will have 1,500 cubic centimeters in size on the, in volume. Here's another one, again, kind of the same thing. And here, pretty much the same thing. It shows you the different steps through which the ancestors went through, the Australopithecus, the Homo habilis, the Homo erectus, and then the Homo neanderthalis, and then the Homo sapiens from nowadays. And the idea is developing more and more the brain. It's interesting the fact that a lot of people say, well, the reason why we develop the brain better than all the other species is because now we can walk in 2 feet, and now we can use our hands, and then we can play with the hands. That was one of the theories, but then I was reading something the other day very interesting, that it wasn't really that. It was the fact that whatever happened in Africa 300,000 million years ago, I love that number, that the weather was ever changing. And pretty much where they found the skeleton of the Homo habilis, they found that in that area, they were able to study the ground, and they saw that during that time, around the time the Homo habilis were around, there were a lot of nasty changes in the weather. Something like what's going on today with the climate change. So, it's, according to these scientists, that's actually what triggered the growth of the brain, that these people were forced to, they saw themselves against these horrible weather changes, and they had to either adapt, move on, or die. Now, the other thing that tells us apart from the other species is the fact that we can do this, supposedly, because some apes do it. But we have the ability to do this, and we can hold pretty much any instrument. Well, not me, because I shake very much. But you can hold any instrument, we can do any kind of job with our hands. And, of course, the fact that we can walk on 2 feet. And no other species can actually walk on 2 feet. Yeah, the apes kind of do it, but the apes, they have to help themselves with the hands. But that's supposedly what tells us apart. This is a cute graphic that compares humans with cats, whales, and bats. And as you can see, the distribution of the bones is exactly the same. And even though there was at some point, I don't know if you guys ever saw this image that they published in some book that it turned out to be fake. The comparison of the embryos of different species. According to that fake graphic, the embryos were really much alike up until pretty much the end, but that's not the case. There's a lot of similarities within embryos, but only at the very beginning of the embryogenesis. after a certain point, everybody has to look their own, right? Now, I actually got this presentation, the idea, from the Freedom from Religion Foundation. They interviewed this lady a few months ago or last year or so. Her name is Abby Hafer. She's from Ohio, and she teaches anatomy at a college over there. And she wrote a book called The Not So Intelligent Designer. Because she in the book, she explains a bunch of things that are super, super wrong with the human body. And one of the things that the people from the intelligent design business talk about is that we have such a perfect eye. But according to Dr. Hafer, the eye is not such a big, perfect thing. The problem is that, and this is a beautiful comparison, because on her presentation she compares the human eye with a bunch of other eyes of underwater animals, like these octopus, is the fact that we have the nerve, and then we're going to have a bunch of nerve fibers covering the retina. Here, this guy is going to have the nerve fibers behind the retina. What is the problem with our eye compared to this guy? We have something blocking the view. You see? Although I see it in this way, okay, great, we're outside of the water, we are exposed to more light. So I guess that would be a nice protective mechanism against overexposure to the light. But it is not perfect. I mean, look at me wearing these things. I mean, this is how bad it is. Beautiful people, ugly. I mean, gorgeous, scary, freaking blind. And then last time, a couple years ago, I went to a doctor and the guy told me, "Oh, you're gonna get cataracts." I'm like, "Really?" Just like my mommy and my granddaddy. Runs in their family. The walking up straight. This is the one of the most interesting things. This is the guys, this is the ladies. This is the male pelvis, this is the female pelvis. And of course, you ladies need to have a wider pelvis. So I always tell my students, guy, female. See, guy, female. We're talking about these. Guy, female. See? And you need to have, women need to have a wider pelvis because of the fact that you have to deliver the good old babies. But there's a problem with delivering the babies, which we got a really bad deal with evolution on the delivering the babies. There's what are we gonna do with delivering the baby? Because we want to walk up straight, right? But we also want what? A big head to feed the big brain. So we have a problem right there. 100 and something years ago, a lot of women died in child labor because of the stupid head of the baby.
Maybe that was birth control.
Exactly, that was the birth control. And they had abortions back then and nobody complained.
Right?
No, nothing.
Yeah,
We're the ones that messed up.
exactly. So what is, I'm sorry?
Their head is.
Right, of course, they have the fontaneos and they have all that stuff, but still, it's a big head for the little birth canal. And it's still very traumatic, for a woman to deliver a baby, even, under natural conditions and all that stuff. And there's a lot of complications that can happen. The baby breached or the baby didn't, and back in the day when they didn't have C-sections, that was a birth control method, population control, of course. But what is the whole problem? The whole problem is that we need to walk up straight. So if you want to walk up straight, if you look at the pelvis of one of the apes, you're going to see that the pelvis of the ape, or pelvis pretty much any other species, they have a very wide pelvis. But they have a wide pelvis because they won't move forward. We have to get a narrower pelvis to be able to walk up straight. If we want, but we have to deliver the babies. We're stuck. Now, the other thing about the pelvis is the tailbone. It actually happened to me within a period of a year and a half or so that I sleep and fell on my butt. The first time I will never forget, I went to deliver a pizza. This is when I first moved to the US back in 93 or 94. I went to deliver a pizza. I used to work for a Pizza Hut in Miami. And it was pouring. And I get to this guy's house. He had a tile floor outside, pouring outside. Just went, whah, bang, right on the butt. Then a couple of years later, I had an apartment in Miami Beach. And it was wet, I got slippery, whoop, bah, same place. And now every time I sit on a hard surface for a long time, I remember those two falls. The causes is useless. The whole thing about the vertebral column is the vertebral column, this thing here that we have in the back of our spine. The whole business is the Eiffel Tower. Pretty much the idea of the Eiffel Tower came out of that design of we have, if you look at the Eiffel Tower, you see that it's tiny at the top, and as you start going down, it gets wider, 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 wider until at the very bottom is humongous. Same thing with the human vertebral column. The vertebral column starts very narrow here because the head is not that big. Well, you have a big head, yeah, sure, still not that big. And then as you go lower on the column, it's going to get wider, 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 wider. We still have a single column system until you get down here. When you get down here to the lumbar area, then you have the big, big vertebrae that they hold most of the weight, and that's where we see most of the issues with lumbar, with herniated disc and all that stuff that you see in a lot of patients. But then we get to the sacrum. And what is the function of the sacrum? The sacrum in other species, the four-legged mammals, is still movable. They move because that's how they move the tail, and they're able to defend themselves, use the tail for a bunch of things, grab the food or do whatever. We don't do the tail. We have the leftover tail, the coccyx is here, that the only function of the coccyx is to fall and break it when you fall on your butt. But the sacrum in human beings is super important because you're going to go from a single column system into even distribution of the weight into two columns, one on each side. Super cool stuff. Now, of course, we all know that every now and then you're going to have a little deviation here, a little deviation here, and then everything gets complicated. But the idea is that you're supposed to be all straight and you're going to have an even distribution of the weight on both sides. So that's the delivery. Now, Dr. Hayford on her little video talks about that we have to go through all this trouble to deliver a stupid bug, right? A little bug. But look at the kangaroos. They don't have that issue. They just keep the bug inside until the baby is big enough, and they're super little bitty bitty bitty, and then when they're big enough, they just come out on the back and they just go hopping.
They go hopping.
Exactly. Now, the other problem we have is this. This is a big, big problem we have. How many times have you had somebody do on you the maneuver to because you choke? You see? Why does that happen? Why do we choke? Because this is all together. It's really, really messed up. It shouldn't be that way. I mean, you have respiratory system here, nasal cavity, you have the superior, middle, and inferior nasal concha. This is the communication with the middle ear. And then you're going to have this piece of bone here, the hard palate, and then you have a soft palate here that whenever you swallow, the thing closes and you don't get any water or food in here. And then you swallow, you close here, and the food is going to go down the esophagus, not into the trachea. But we all know that that doesn't work, that we still choke, you know? Or you're drinking soda, somebody tells a very good joke and then you have soda coming out of your nose. Because we lose control of that reflexes over there. So, Dr. Hafer says that who had it best? The whale had it best. Because the whale, they have two tubes, one for eating and the other one for just breathing. And they have the thing at the top where they are able to get rid of the CO2. Yeah, the whales. And the whales, I don't know if you ever seen how whales came to be. It was super interesting. They used to be land mammals, and then they got too big, and they were like, okay, we're bored here, and we're going back to the water. And the cool thing is that the whales, they have a pelvis, but it's a tiny little pelvis, left over from 300,000 million years ago. Super, super cute pelvis. Of course, we have to talk about sex, because there's no way around it. Guys, how many of you ever gotten kicked down the balls by an angry lady? or some other guy. That's a problem right there. We have, I mean, because what is the purpose of evolution? To keep the species going. Right, that's what the whole deep business of evolution is about. Evolution doesn't care about old people, I'm sorry, but it's true. Evolution doesn't care about much about the very young. Evolution cares about people within reproductive age. So you can keep the species going, exactly, the breeders. So, guess what? We have a problem with the male reproductive system. The testicles are in a very, very, very bad position. Because that's one of the most fragile areas of the man's body. I mean, they kick you down the earth and be like, sorry for a while. Why do we have the testicles there?
So they can keep cool.
So they're cooler, yeah.
Exactly, but it's freaking retarded. Why do they have to be so cool? Of course, because the inside of the body, the temperature is 37 degrees Celsius, 98.5 degrees Fahrenheit. But the testicles, in order to work better, more efficiently, they need to work at 35 degrees Celsius. So those 2 degrees Celsius, they make a difference in the world, in the business of spermatogenesis, the formation of the sperm. So that's why during embryogenesis, our testicles are going to drop. The testicles are actually formed right next to the kidneys. And then they start dropping, and they fall. And there's some babies that are born with the testicles all the way up here, and that's a problem because they're not going to be able to do what?
Procreate.
Babies, exactly, and that's not good for evolution. And we call that, you know what's the medical terminology for testicle is? Orchid, just like the flower. And we call that condition cryptorchidism, meaning the hidden testicle, the hidden orchid, or the hidden testicle. So, we have the issue with the testicle that is exposed, but it's because of the temperature business. So evolution said, okay, that's fine, the testicle is exposed, but it doesn't matter because we're still gonna have them babies. So who got it better than us? The frogs. So this is the business of the evolution. This is of the embryogenesis of the testicle. The testicles, they form up here and they start dropping, pop, and they fall. And that's actually another problem that we get out of that. I mean, how many of you ever heard of somebody getting a hernia over here? And that's because that canal where the testicle is coming down doesn't fuse correctly. And that's a cause for a hernia right there. So if you guys have that issue, it's because of that. Isn't that exciting? So, these guys have it better than us. The frogs. The frogs, they have a testicle here somewhere. Look at these things here. They're inside. You see, these are the kidneys. And they're there with the kidneys on the inside, so nobody's going to kick them in the balls. No. That's convenient. Now, of course, these guys, they're cold-blooded animals, but still. Come on. What was the problem here? What is the problem with this picture?
Gravity.
This is the problem with this system here. The appendix. Appendix is useless. What is the only thing we do with the appendix? Get appendicitis. That's all. We don't take it out, we die. It's pretty much. We get peritonitis and then we go by.
Leo, you're also a microbiologist, right? Have you ever read about the fact that the appendix could be used to store important bacteria for when people in the old days got sick and eliminated everything from their intestine?
You told me about that. Yeah, I have to look into that. But
I heard that it was before we had fire. We used to eat meat raw, and now we cook our meat so we don't need it anymore.
That's right. Really? What did it do for raw meat? Help to digest it?
I don't know what it did. You don't
Carnivore. That's where.
exactly. So in the how you call it? So look at the appendicitis, right? Yeah, that's an appendicitis. So you look at the normal size and look at the humongous appendix, right? The appendix gets blocked here and then it starts growing. The intraluminal pressure starts, and then eventually it's gonna burst and you go bye-bye. And now insurance companies, they don't want to pay for the surgery. They rather wait for you to have the thing burst and then they'll treat the infection.
Ah,
I don't get it.
Yeah, big pharma.
I know, please. Now, that's what the appendix used to be back in the day, this thing. When we were in 04,
Appendix,
yeah, the appendix used to be the back where we were get burned
but
you
other
know,
animals
get-
have them.
Exactly, they have the rumen, which is what the cow has here, to get rid of the grass, to get rid of the cellulose from the grass. We don't break down cellulose, they do, because they have the rumen. We used to get rid of the cellulose 300,000 years ago when we used to be on all four and eat grass, but we don't do that anymore. So the appendix started getting smaller, and got into this little tiny little thing that all it does is give you appendicitis. A couple more things about evolution that are super interesting to me. I always mention my students the fact about this skin color. Super interesting, the fact that black people, they have a bunch of melanin, and white people, they only have a little bit of melanin. So what is the difference? Black people come from Africa, where there's sun 24/7, you're exposed to the harsh environment, and you either change or you get skin cancer. So they change, and we have the same number of melanocytes, the cells of the skin that produce the melanin, but the genetic makeup of somebody who's black is gonna tell the melanocytes, work, and make a lot of melanin, work. In your case, you're telling your melanocytes, take the day off. That's all. Another good example of evolution is the adaptation mechanism by which, for example, I was talking to Joseph before, he was telling me that he used to go to Nepal back in the day, and I have a niece that she moved to Colorado, and the first couple of weeks in Colorado, she was tired and dizzy and tired and short of breath all the time. And then the 2 weeks later, she was fine and dandy. What happened to her?
Oxygen level.
Exactly, the oxygen level is low. So what is the adaptation mechanism?
the red blood cell.
We start producing more red blood cells and more hemoglobin, exactly. And then one of my favorite diseases on the whole planet, malaria. Malaria is the #1 infectious disease on the planet. But somebody was saying here that, I was talking before, that nobody cares about malaria because it's just a bunch of poor black people. Who cares about them, right? So, but it's the most prevalent, how you call it, infectious disease on the planet. Now, you're gonna see that in every single part of the planet where there's a lot of malaria, there has been an evolutionary change in these people's blood against the malaria, an evolutionary response. So you have sickle cell disease in sub-Saharan Africa, you have thalassemias in sub-Saharan Africa also. As you move further north in Africa, you're gonna have other diseases associated with people of Northern Africa. If you go to Asia, you have other diseases, you have something like spherocytosis. And pretty much they all do the same thing. They try to make a living hell for the protozoa, for the plasmodium, when it goes into the erythrocyte cycle of the malaria, right, Dr. Lazo de la Vega? Yeah, something like that. Yeah, I have to ask my colleague, the microbiologist over there. And I think that's it. I'm out of ideas.
No, but finish the story about malaria, because what happened is that after the people in Africa had that sickle cell problem,
But
then they can defend them, they will not have malaria because they have this sickle problem. So they are able to reproduce and survive having that trait. But then the people who had no trait, they die of
They
malaria.
die, or
And
if
they
you get-
survive,
but
and you're passing that to their next generation.
Right, but the other problem is the other side of the coin with the sickle cell disease is that the people who are protected against malaria are the people with the trait. The
Right.
people who get full-blown sickle cell disease, yeah, they get the protection, but they get a super nasty disease, which is sickle cell disease that can actually kill you.
Yes, if you have both alleles.
Exactly, if you have both alleles, you're gonna have full-blown sickle cell disease. But if you only have one allele, that's protection that you're gonna get what, like flu-like symptoms, you're gonna get the liver stage of the disease, but then when the bug goes to the red blood cell's gonna go like, I don't like it here. And then it's gonna leave. Any questions?
Yeah, Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh,
Go ahead.
Yes, what current obvious examples of evolution is occurring? I remember years ago hearing that there's certain types of birds that we can actually see evolve in 1 or 2 generations. And are there other examples of evolution that we could see?
Flu virus.
yeah, there you go, bacteria. The bacteria, that's another great example.
Virus.
We have the viruses and the bacteria. That's why they haven't been able to come up with a cure for AIDS. Or every year we have to get a flu shot because every year the stupid virus mutates and becomes resistant to the vaccine from the previous year. So every year we have to get a new vaccine.
Well, we also changed in size. The human beings are getting taller. Because when you see, like, over in Germany, we have these museum villages where they are the old houses where people lived in. I have to duck. I
Yes,
cannot walk
I
through a
had to
door
duck
I'm
in the
tall.
rock cottages.
Because they were all
Yeah,
more
yeah.
like 4'6" or in that area.
Isn't
so.
that related to nutrition?
Yeah.
That's what
Yeah,
I was
most likely.
That's,
Yeah,
that's
not
eating meat
necessarily.
makes you
It
taller.
was like, for example, there was a museum in the Dominican Republic. There's a museum, they're still there. And they had, the Spaniards from those days, they used to have this little bowl that they put here under, right here under their neck to shave.
Yeah.
And the things that the bowl had a tiny little cut, like this big, not even like this big, like a little U kind of thing. And the U kind of thing was to fit into the neck. But you look at the little U-shaped cut, I'm like, what kind of guy has a neck that thin? And you could tell it's because of the malnutrition that they had back in those days. I mean, they stuck you inside a ship here, go to the Americas, and you spend 3 months just eating whatever.
Can I ask,
Yes.
in what environment, you say the flu virus mutates and of course the bacteria, the antibiotic resistance. In what environment does that virus mutate? So like somebody has the flu and they had the flu shot, the flu tries, where's that virus in mutating?
Anyway, it can happen inside the body
With the purpose of being resistant
to
the-
to survive. He's
So
just,
is it
he's
in
trying
my-
to
I
survive.
take the flu shot, is it in my body that the virus mutates?
It can mutate inside of your
and then
body,
I
it can
give it to
mutate outside of the body.
somebody?
Yeah.
Doesn't it also cross species sometimes? And that's what.
Yeah,
swine flu-
exactly. You have the swine and then the bird flu and all that
Adding
So
stuff.
I think there's like 4 major genes that control the flu virus, if I remember right, and they switch back and forth, on and off.
But also the bacteria, so
But we have
antibiotics
microbiologists here.
no longer effective for bacteria.
The bacteria is
So-
super interesting because the bacteria not only has mutated against the antibiotics, that's the most obvious thing we have, but there's a lot of mutation against our immune system. That's the scary part. You have bacteria that at first the immune system was able to go, oh look, a bacteria, eat the bacteria, dilemma solved. But then now you have bacteria like Pseudomonas that they have a capsule on the outside. And the capsule on the outside, they go try to eat them. And then you have bacteria like the tuberculosis bacteria, mycobacterium, that you eat it, but you cannot destroy it. The idea is that you eat the bacteria, the white blood cell is going to eat the bacteria, it's going to put it inside a little vesicle and throw Lysol and hydrogen peroxide at it to get rid of it. But the tuberculosis bacteria is like taking a shower, doesn't care.
But if I take a very strong antibiotic for a bacterial infection, and then is it my fault that the bacteria has mutated to be resistant to the antibiotic? Is it my fault?
No. This is the thing about the antimicrobial therapy. You go to a doctor and they tell you, you have to take the antibiotic for
14 days.
14 days, 10 days, 7 days, whatever. You have to take it for 14 days. If you take it for too long, you're going to have too many side effects. Meaning you're going to kill the natural flora, plus all the other side effects that you're going to get with that antibiotic. If you don't take it long enough, if you only take it for 3 days and you start feeling better, here comes the resistance. So what's going to happen? You expose the bacteria to the antibiotic, but you didn't expose it long enough to kill it. So now you have bacteria that got exposed to it, got a taste of it, and Yeah, we can do something out of that. Yeah, we can. Yeah, let's do it. Okay, fine.
But they don't like to prescribe the stronger antibiotics. And it's like, if I take that antibiotic, is it my fault that the bacteria
They don't like. Right.
has affected all of society?
Right, but they don't like to prescribe the strong antibiotics because the stronger the antibiotic we have, what you call a broad spectrum antibiotic. The stronger the antibiotic, the more side effects you're gonna get. The more bacteria, normal flora you're gonna get. So that's why the stronger antibiotics are kept in the hospital. The vancomycin and the carbapenem and all those antibiotics, they don't sell them at Walgreens. They only have them at the hospital. And still, we're having issues these days that the bacteria that lives in the ventilator system of the hospital and the AC units of the hospital, they're resistant to all this stuff.
But if you have a strain that has already been exposed and is partly resistant, and your antibiotic exposed into your antibiotic and you don't get cured from it, then you're
Then I
creating
am
a more of a
passing.
resistant organism.
Passing there.
I thought you took an antibiotic for a virus that you don't
No.
take for a bacteria.
No, it's the other way around.
And that was a problem. When they first came up with penicillin, everybody used to take penicillin. Oh yeah, sure. But if you get a flu or you get the cold, that's a virus. Those are viruses. You have rhinovirus, you have the influenza virus, and it doesn't work.
The medical doctors were very anxious to give you an antibiotic when you had a virus, just to give you something.
Yeah.
And that was a big problem too.
Yeah.
And that still is a problem.
Yes, sir.
So when thinking about what's going to happen with human beings and how we might evolve in the future, I found some recent news of interest. You've probably heard about this Chinese doctor who changed the genetic material
Of the little babies.
in the little babies,
Yeah.
and he said he was trying to make them HIV resistant, but there were other intentions. But you can imagine further down the line when they identify the genes that are connected to human intelligence and how to optimize human intelligence, they're going to be able to figure out which one of those genes get turned on. And I think maybe 50 years from now, you're going to have the option of going in the clinic and saying, and the guy's going to say, for $10,000, I can give you a baby that with 90% certainty will have 15 more points on a standard IQ test.
Yeah.
And there'll be a tremendous competition to get genetically modified babies.
To get those $10,000.
It'll be
That's when the
irresistible.
world
There was a movie
turned
about that. It
atheist.
was a really good movie about that. With Ethan Hawke.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, really good movie about that. How in a not too distant future they had genetically modified people that they were supposed to be better than the old-fashioned babies,
Yeah.
and the movie proves that everything was wrong.
Well, that's the inevitability. The human species will probably diverge into people that are genetically modified and those people that are not genetically
That's right.
modified. And we'll end up with two different, species, people that are privileged and can purchase it, their generations will cumulatively gain in society with, disease-resistant people, bodies that are as perfect as they can get it and highly intelligent. How do you then compete against people that have been genetically engineered is the question.
You drive your way into the right school, I think.
Well, some of that's already being done by genetic counseling.
Yeah.
People either not reproducing or,
Exactly, I had a student a few years ago in Fort Lauderdale, and the kid was Jewish, and he told me that because his girlfriend is Jewish, they have to go to genetic counseling because they have a bunch of the Tay-Sachs disease and Niemann-Pick disease all associated. Oops, I'm in trouble. The wife is here. He made it from town. That's a wife.
Thank you. The wife.
Welcome, yeah.
Yeah, that's what's based on the
right there.
Now that you mentioned the thing about the babies from China and that doctor, it was, I don't know if you guys heard how that came about. Back in 2008, there was an American man living in Germany, and this guy he was HIV positive, and turns out that he also, because of the HIV, it seems that he contracted one of those viruses that give you lymphoma or leukemia, something like that. Because there are viruses that give you lymphoma and leukemia. And you know that the first thing they recommend whenever you have one of these blood diseases is a what transplant? A bone marrow transplant. So guess what? A bone marrow transplant. So guess what? There's a 1% of the human population that is immune to the virus, to the HIV virus. And this guy was lucky enough that the donor they found for his transplant, that was a matching donor, had the mutation. When they gave him the transplant, he ended up cancer-free and HIV-free.
Wow.
Forever.
Wow.
Because the thing is that in order for the virus to attach to the CD4 cell, you need the CD4 receptor, but you also need what we call the co-receptors. And these people with this mutation, they don't have the co-receptor, and without the co-receptor, you don't have attachment. Ever since they discovered this, they've been trying to replicate this science, but they haven't been able to because it's super, super difficult.
Well, couldn't we make everybody immune?
That's what the guy in China was trying to do.
No.
You see, the guy in China was trying to get these two unborn babies, you know, two little twin little girls. He modified the genome to try to get them to be born with this mutation. But then the last thing I heard about that was that some issues came along with these babies, that they were gonna have these other issues because he's playing. And then a bunch of people started attacking the guy because of the lack of ethics in the study and all that stuff. So. Yeah.
It's hard to predict what the best, which humans are going to adapt. I mean, if you and I are in that smoke-filled environment, if I have a natural ability to fight cancer, that is, aren't other things, if we live in a toxic environment, aren't there, as the species that are best able to deal with toxins, maybe what progresses, not necessarily the one with the best, most developed.
That's not, we have genes that they make, that they are going to help you get the cancer faster, but then we also have genes that they're going to protect us from the cancer. And the idea is, what gene is going to be turned on, what gene is going to be turned off? And what gene did you inherit from your parents? What genes did I inherit from my parents? Yeah.
Is it possible, Leo, that because a gene that would give you longevity doesn't really help you to reproduce? Because you're not going to be having kids when you're 95 years old.
Why not?
74 years old.
I hope, Leo, you're not having kids when you're 95. But
We're not going to have kids at that age, right? That was the
yeah, I don't want to wish it, but as long
You never know.
Right, you never know.
the genes for survival have been the genes that allow you to reproduce. But for all species, right? That's the important genes to get to the age where you can reproduce and to do so successfully. So I don't see how a gene for longevity would be selected.
But that's not a natural selection occurring. You're talking about something
Yes.
in the lab creating it.
That would be an artificial.
Artificial selection.
Yeah, but in terms of natural selection, maybe that's why our
Well, we don't live
prescore
forever.
and 10 is
We're living a
about
lot
good
longer than
enough.
previous generations.
Well, let's
from
face it, we're
diet,
not dying as often.
from
Yeah, because of the
medical
diet
care.
and
Well,
the medical
Antibiotics,
yeah, that's the medical
surgery,
field.
yeah.
But I want to mention something that might be personal. Another place you can go and see old houses where I could not possibly stand up in a room is in old houses in England, but now
Yes.
not at all. And they attributed that to the small villages where they were inbred. And when the bicycle became popular, suddenly people were taller. They were inbred.
People went to the cities.
They got to go to another
yes,
village.
Well, they went somewhere else to find.
Yeah, they got to go find
And
the
with
girl
the
from somewhere else.
mergers, the enclosing of the land by the rich landowners forced people to the cities, and that changed a lot of it too, and of course the Industrial Revolution. So it's funny because some people did get taller, but I was taller than all the boys in my class in England. I was taller than every single boy in my class until some boys came from Iran and they were taller than me.
Right.
Well,
At a certain age, girls are taller than boys.
Yeah, but it was really odd because we were taught about, we were raised in America those first few years. So
So
we
your
always thought it was
nutrition
the
was
American
different.
diet that changed it because every summer we go to the rock festival looking for tall American men. I mean, that was our thing to do. Let's look for those tall American soldiers, you know, because they were like gods. They were built like David, you know. It was amazing, but it's odd, isn't it?
Well, it's more than.
Well, they were
the
selected,
American diet,
yeah.
because
I
In
mean,
the
and now
war.
it's the reverse of that because now there's obesity in England,
Well,
you know.
in this country, I
Yeah.
went to a Jewish singles bar, and all the men were short compared to non-Jewish men, and these are the same diet.
So then that would be genetics, right? What you get from your parents, right?
Yeah.
Then how about this what I read and I can't concentrate, never have been able to concentrate properly, so I only read headlines basically. But there was a study done about DNA and trauma, post-traumatic syndrome, changing your DNA. So is that evolution, or is that just the
Epigenetics.
effects of an?
Epigenetics, yeah.
Yeah. So
Is that true? There's something like that can
I-
change your
Yeah,
DNA?
oh yeah.
yes,
Stress can
Stress
change your
changes your
DNA.
yes.
Stress can cause a lot.
Turns genes on and off. Yeah.
So what happens
That's
in
not
modern
changing.
society? Like, are our genes all turned off or on? Then
It
let's
should
say
change the
a
expression
village
of your
Your
genes.
allele, right.
in the pal that you know just has a running stream and the outhouse, you know. So I just wonder if they're going to do more studies about that. It's just,
Yes.
and
Yeah,
then there
there's
was
a lot of
one other
studies.
thing I read
There's
about
a lot of studies
leprosy.
going on.
Leprosy. They said that with the extent of homelessness in America now, it was just, like I said,
That was
read the
that was a
headline.
conservative rag that's published
But
now.
it was that they said the rise of leprosy, they believe is coming in America. That leprosy is going to rear its head
It's gonna
again.
be here.
Oh.
Yes, did you see
But
that?
on the migrants, no.
No.
It was a
it's-
conservative rag that was talking about
Yeah, but you know, there's terrible
Los
homelessness in
Angeles
California.
and the, yeah.
I can't even explain to you. I can walk down the street and people are asking me for money. It is, I've never seen anything like it except for when I lived in England during the Thatcher era. That is the comparability of it. That I can see why they're saying there might be a rise in disease based upon poverty. You know, so I just didn't know if they
But
were
California has,
doing studies on that.
now has socialized medicine, right? So
Yeah, but
they should be able
they want to
to,
get, it's horrible.
Treat
It's
even the
horrible how they're
They
treating the
have a lot of
homeless.
immigrants.
they
You
don't.
know what I find
Well,
interesting
they have Obamacare, anybody can apply for it there.
Well,
is,
depends.
Yeah, but trying to apply for it and having the right ID and
And you have to
all that
have
stuff.
an address and all that.
Yeah.
so I find interesting in looking forward is,
Yes.
we assume that, in order to create a baby, you have to have a male and a female, to do this. But as you have advances in genetics, and manipulation of genes, you can easily see a time when two females can share genetic material. They can both contribute the 23 chromosomes and have a baby. Of course, all the babies would be female
Yeah,
because
girls.
it's
That's
XX.
all.
But you can have males, you can have two males having a baby, and you can actually have three people having a baby.
Who would harvest that,
Because-
or who
Oh,
would?
that's Schwarzenegger would.
Because with three people, you know, you have problems with the mitochondria DNA. So if you got a problem in there, a third person can contribute DNA material to fix the mitochondrial DNA, and then you have genetic materials from the male and the female. So you
So
actually
you
can
would have
three
so,
people.
So you would have 2 eggs and 1 sperm, and because the mitochondria is in the egg, so you're gonna get this egg to pretty much cross out the mitochondrial problems that you're gonna get from egg number 1.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'll be interesting.
Yeah. So now you
But
have
then
three
how
parents.
do you do the selection of which egg are you gonna fertilize?
Well, you fertilize a bunch of them and see which ones.
Well, really, you don't even need a sperm, because all you need to do is take the nucleus out of the egg and put a full nucleus into the egg, and then you got an embryo.
Right.
So is that research happening now? Or-
Oh, yeah.
It's
There's-
That
doable
is so
now.
interesting.
Did you ever hear of the company called Repet?
No.
It's
Repet? Yeah.
I
Animals
thought
doing
that
that.
was the joke.
You send a tissue sample from your pet, and they clone your pet with that technology.
Why are you telling me?
We were doing that with racing.
Well, Barbara Streisand has done that.
Oh, Dolly was a.
And that's not a.
Oh, yeah, Dolly.
Seventies, somewhere.
Yeah, do you remember Dolly?
Yeah, that was.
Yeah.
It's actually an exact replication.
Where do you do this? I want another two.
It's a, it's,
Having offspring just from the female does happen, and they keep finding other species that do it. And
parthenogenesis.
Parthenogenesis in turkeys, that's not so unusual.
And fish, a lot of fish.
They are a little bit smaller, they don't have as
Snail.
many feathers, and when they get mature, they go around preaching to all the other turkeys.
So doctor, what is there anything changing in us humans? Evolutionary?
I'm very sure it is. You know, there's no way to tell. You know, the things that it takes ages to see.
That's an interesting debate, because we're always outbreeding all the time, you know?
Because the jaws are getting small,
Sometimes people are orange.
yeah. Yeah, we have two of them.
That's environmental.
By the way, the body expo is on display in Las Vegas at the Luxor.
Oh, really?
You're German, right?
Yes,
You ever watched the movie Anatomy?
yes, I did.
I love that movie.
That's a great.
It's based on these exposition. It's really cool, scary movie.
Comments or questions?
Thank you.
Oh,
Thanks, Mark. Thanks to Michelle for opening up the house for us.